All right, so this morning we're going to talk a lot about some of the comprehension strategies that are listed in the Inside Information book that we've been reading during our Thursday morning collaboratives. And I also think just this conversation will kind of help us when we go to Ms. Foster when we talk to her about wanting to, kind of alternate our early childhood schedule. Because I know in talking to the kindergarten teachers, we know that, the kids are struggling with comprehension when they get downstairs. Mm-hmm. I think it's just because a lot of times our curriculum is not necessarily aligned to what they actually do downstairs, so the expectations are different and the kids really struggle with that. So just going over some of the strategies that are listed in the book and trying to figure out either, okay, are we already doing that in our tools classroom? Or if not, how can we incorporate those strategies? How can we make it, appropriate, mm-hmm. age and developmentally appropriate? So I think it's on page 78. Some of the strategies are listed. I actually wanted to quickly read over a quick paragraph that brought the strategies into play. The author was talking a lot about background knowledge and content knowledge and how important it is. So actually on page 74, there's a paragraph. It says, neglecting the reading and research phase means missing opportunities to build content knowledge. I can't stress enough how important content knowledge is to overall reading success. For a dramatic illustration of this, let's go back in time to 1988. In a study published by Donna Recht and Lauren Leslie, a group of 7th and 8th grade students who were either good readers or poor readers and who had either high or low knowledge of baseball were asked to read a passage describing half an inning of a baseball game. Students were then asked to reenact and summarize what they read. The researchers found a significant effect for high versus low knowledge, but no effect for reading ability. Baseball knowledge, not reading ability, predicted the students' comprehension. Poor readers with high knowledge of baseball outperformed good readers with low knowledge of baseball. In fact, even when good readers had high knowledge of baseball, they did no better on the post-reading tasks than poor readers with high knowledge of baseball. Knowledge matters to comprehension. It matters a lot. Building knowledge is an essential component of effective comprehension instruction. So what do you guys think about content knowledge and how we kind of introduce it and build on it and kind of pull it from the students? What do you guys think about that?
I think with tools, it's not really in-depth on how they build the content knowledge for students, because oftentimes with tools they have cards, and so the cards are to me more focused on a skill in the book, but it doesn't really build knowledge. We do have a vocabulary card, and we can use the vocabulary card to build that knowledge, but if you're only focusing, you have 3s and 4s, you can only focus on so many vocabulary words. But if you're reading a book about baseball, some kids do have knowledge about baseball and some don't. So I think that if we activate the knowledge first, then go into some of the vocabulary, I think it would help. I think what we do is we use those cards as a skill, and we read that book for 1 or 2 days, and then we move on. Mm-hmm. Instead of us saying on Monday, which is day 1, I'm going to bring in a baseball bat, I'm going to bring in a glove, I'm going to bring, we used to do that. Realistic props. And so we talk about it. We actually stand up, and I have a kid hold a glove, and I have the bat, and and so that day would just be activating knowledge. Exactly. Then the next day we could actually expand on that, and then we read it by maybe the 3rd day. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we don't do with tools. We're so focused on today we're going to look at inferences. Right. And so we read the book, and our focus is inference, but guess what? The kids have no knowledge of the book that you're reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. And I kind of think it's like a disservice to the kids, because I feel like it's in a way we're not valuing what they're already bringing to the table, because a lot of kids do have experiences that that can connect to the things we study in the classroom, but if we're not taking the time to actually figure out, okay, what do they know? I like sometimes doing a KWL chart either before we start a theme. Okay, what do you already know about it? Like before we started the grocery thing, we talk about, okay, well, what grocery stores do you go to? A lot, and there are more than just Safeway and Giant and Shoppers, so a lot of them do have those experiences beforehand. So I do think content knowledge and just really building on that is really important. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So some of the strategies that were listed on there are on page 78. Ms. Johnson, did you want to take a look at the first one?
Yeah. So the first one is searching. It says looking for specific information in a text. With printed text, searching may involve using the index, table of contents, and headings. With digital text, it may involve using icons, menu bars, a search box, and so on. I think this is kind of hard for 3s and 4s. I think you have to approach it a little bit in a different way, because they're not actually reading themselves. Mm-hmm. So you have to guide them in the search. Right. One of the things that I really like, sometimes when I borrow a book from Miss Smith, she has sticky notes in her book, mm-hmm. and she already has mapped out or has notes for what she wants the kids to search for, but because they don't have the understanding to be able to do it, it's almost like they're primed, kind of, or she's primed. She knows what she wants them to search for, so she has to direct them towards that, and she's got a note. She knows what it is she wants them to search for, and with help, they're able to figure out what it is. So they're searching for something, not through reading, but through listening, and also through pictures.
Right.
So yeah, I like that.
So that's something that we can probably all incorporate in our classrooms whenever we do read-alouds or, large or small group literacy, just going through, even if it's a familiar text, something you've already read, just rereading and saying, okay, well, what's different? What can I point out that's different this time? Just having like sticky notes, whether it's a vocabulary word that you want to highlight, or something that's changed in the story or something like that. So, Ms. Nelson, did you want to take the second one?
Sure. Skimming, looking or reading through text quickly and superficially, usually for the purpose of gaining a general sense of the text or looking for specific information to read more carefully. Basically, just kind of doing a picture walk, introducing new vocabulary words, words they don't know, kind of like briefing them, just ask them questions. What do you think this book could be about? As you do the picture walk and general sense of text or looking for specific information. You pretty much have to, of course, guide them on the specific information, like one page at a time, maybe perhaps reading a few pages at a time and stopping there and doing like a follow-up or feedback, just something that, not going through the whole entire book, but reading a few pages at a time and just talking about those pages at that particular time.
Yeah, and that's something that we all already do, picture walks. Whether, once again, like if it's a brand new book or it's something that you've reread, doing those picture walks beforehand definitely help with comprehension. I'll take number 3. It says monitoring, clarifying, and fixing up. So it says attending to one's meaning construction and using strategies such as rereading or asking questions as needed if or when meaning breaks down. So to me, this really focuses a lot like on vocabulary and the kids being able to understand what the words mean. And of course, this is way above their head. But what I did like about it, what it says, was asking questions. So I think asking those higher order thinking questions really is able to pull the information out of the kids. Okay, well, so we know what this word, but how do you know that? Explain that. Well, okay, well, what do you think would happen next? Or I wonder, and we'll kind of leave it open for the kids to kind of, add their own scenarios to it. So Ms. Smith, about number 4.
The next one, activating and applying prior knowledge. Thinking about what one knows related to the text. Good readers integrate new knowledge and prior knowledge while reading informational text. So when you're reading, for example, the other day we did a story about spiders. And so, you talk to the kids about what you know about spiders. And then you introduce some interesting facts about spiders. What they like to do and what they like to eat. And so that gets the kids excited about the book. So being able to, or we had inside of a glass, we have a spider I guess they've kind of like put it inside. And so the kids can actually look up under it and actually see the different parts of the bodies. So once you activate that prior knowledge, the reading is more interesting and the kids can actually take it in and understand it.
Right, and I think the reading becomes more meaningful because they're able to kind of see like, oh, this is something that I already know about. Oh, this happened at home, okay, but now it's happening at school. It becomes more meaningful. They can make that connection. And I think using the language of, okay, of course, we're not going to say, okay, kids, we're going to activate prior knowledge. But it's saying, okay, let's make a connection to something we did at home, something we did with our families, something we're going to do here in the classroom. So using that language, I think, helps them to internalize what we're doing as well.
I think saying you already know is a good phrase because it makes them know like, oh, this is something I can contribute to. Like, I am smart about this. This is information that I can give. I can contribute something that's meaningful because I already know about it. Right. So instead of saying like activating prior knowledge, like you guys get to tell me something that you already know about. Yeah.
Yep.
And then maybe you can do charting, like what you know about this and what would you like to learn about this, and at the end result, when you
what did we all learn?
Exactly.
Really good. Jonathan, how about inferring?
It says using information in the text and prior knowledge to figure out something important to constructing meaning that is not explicitly stated in the text. The text says, I know, and so. The kids actually do a really good job of this. I like hearing their inferences. Sometimes it's funny and sometimes it's like, not quite.
Right.
But you see their wheels turning and you know that they're thinking. We use pictures a lot for this. I know that one that we do a lot in the beginning of the year is like, not the character empathy, but just emotions, like looking at a character's face and saying like, well, this is what happened. How do you think that this character feels about that? Or look at their face. Do you think that they're happy or that they're sad? So they do a lot of inferring, and they do it naturally anyway, all the time.
And that makes a connection to one of the gold checkpoints that we have for social emotional. It says response to emotional cues. Like they can always tell, like, oh, she's mad, or because someone took her
she
toy,
wants her mom,
or she wants her mom,
because
that's why
she's
she's sad. Right. So they're using those clues, those small clues that they already have to make inferences to, to use that information to learn something new. How about self-questioning, Ms. Smith?
All right, self-questioning. Asking oneself questions related to the text as one reads. Questions about why or how pieces of information in a text relate may be especially helpful. Self-questioning is probably actually hard for students to do. However, when we do the buddy reading activity, they do have one picture where it has the question mark. And so what I do is I give them a question. For example, how did you like the story? Or what do you think is going to happen next? So we talk about that question all week, and then when they see the question mark on the little card, they know to ask that question. So that helps to prepare them to start asking questions so they'll understand what self-questioning is. Because at that age, it's kind of hard for them to develop a question or create a question for themselves. Or what I do is I model and say, all right, we're going to turn and talk. And we start thinking, and while they're thinking, I'm modeling self-questioning. I wonder, why did the spider, try to catch the fly? So that's another way of doing it.
Yeah, using those stems is really helpful too. I know for visualizing, that's definitely a strategy that we all already incorporate. We have the external mediated card for when we do our read during Story Lab for visualizing. Just says forming mental pictures of text content such as an animal behavior or the inner workings of a machine. So asking them, really having them to take a mental picture. So if you just do a picture walk, or maybe just read one page at a time. Okay, now friends, let's close our eyes. What do you see? What do you hear? What's around you? Then we also incorporate that during our math time as well, like when we play math memory, asking the kids to visualize, okay, so we remember this was here, let's take a mental picture, and just all using that language, like a mental picture helps us to remember something, drawing a picture in our head is very helpful.
During weather too, we do that a lot. I'll have them look for a second outside, but they take a picture and then they sit down and they can't actually see it anymore, but they're remembering what was in their picture.
That's good. Visually representing says using physical tools such as Venn diagrams or reenactment to organize and or remember information from a text.
I use the graphing. I like graphing. And so like if we're talking about your favorite fruit or vegetable, and then basically we talk about it, and then I'll have the graph set up, fruits, vegetables, and then we'll, I'll pose a question like, what's your favorite fruit? And banana, apple, whatever. And so they have to come up and put a smiley face under that particular column or write their name even. So that's kind of a visual graphing.
Yeah, what jumped out to me was the part that using physical tools. That to me, that just means like our props and things that we have in our centers, during make-believe playtime. So having like realistic props and then incorporating them when we do, read aloud and things like that. Oh, and using maybe like puppets or things like that to like retell a story. It also says reenactment. So to me, that just means like make the play practice. So let's model for what it looks like in this center. Or if we're reading a story, okay, well let someone can someone reenact what just happened in the story. Highlighting and annotating, using marks and notes in print or digitally to draw attention to particular information or responses to it.
That one, what I do is, for example, if I'm doing dictation, so I may have all the children's names listed, and I may pose a question, or it might be an inference. What do you think is going to happen next? For example, we did the gingerbread man, and he got on the fox's tail, and so the kids had to predict. First of all, what do you know about foxes? They're sneaky, they're sly. So now, what do you think is going to happen? So what I do is I have the kids' names, and I allow the kids to tell me, and then I write their responses. And so that's the same thing as annotating, because you're sitting there and you're looking, or sometimes I'll draw a picture beside their names, and when we go back down, like for example, Aubrey will say, oh, I said that the fox is going to eat them, because I have the gingerbread man and the inside the mouth. So that's a way of trying to use it for the early childhood, because that is kind of hard with highlighting, but we can do some type of annotated piece.
Right.
And they do a good job of actually remembering it. Like when we make predictions for a story, and they're excited to find out what really happens, and then we get to the end, we go back to it, and they're like, "Oh, I said that," and they can point to like their name. They can't necessarily, of course, read what I wrote down, but they remember that that's their name, and they said,
or
"This is what's going to happen."
Or someone else said that.
Exactly.
So that's a good way of kind of using the annotating piece.
And then the last strategy that's listed, it says gisting and summarizing, noting and stating the main points of what is read. Good readers engage in this process while reading informational text, not only when they're finished.
Summarizing is hard. I just said, can you tell me what the story was about?
Right.
And some kids now, the older ones, are able to say, it was about a little boy who, it was a cookie and he ran away. So they're starting to get the gist of what summarizing is, instead of it being the first page.
Right.
Because in the beginning they say, this is what happened, but that's the first page. Now they're kind of giving a little bit more detail.
Right, like adding events in the story. This happened first. Most of them aren't able to use that language. Okay, this was first, this was next. But, first he went to his mommy's house, and then his mommy didn't have a chair, so they had to go to the store, and, so on and so forth.
Or putting it in order if you have 4 pictures.
Sequence
it.
Or you can ask them, what's the favorite part of the story, or why did you think this happened at the end of the story, or what could happen differently than,
Right.
And,
I think sometimes modeling summarizing for them, too, really helps before you even get into working on that particular skill with them. Like when you reread stories and you say, okay, guys, yesterday or last week we read a story about, you tell them the title, but then you say, well, the story was about X, Y, and Z. So if you've done this a number of times and then you ask them, what was the story about, they have examples already of you summarizing without you necessarily saying, okay, let's summarize. Yeah.
Or if you chunk it, say you read the first 7 pages, and instead of read the pages, you ask them what happened
so far.
Then you start off with the next
part,
half. And most of the time,
That's
they're pretty much they're able to do that.
Order.
So I think almost all of the strategies that we listed, they're either something that we're already doing, or more things that we can incorporate, into making reading more meaningful, so that hopefully when the kids do get downstairs to kindergarten, most of them won't be reading, by them independently, but they will at least, have that introduction to pre-reading skills, as well as, we're giving them the letters and the letter sounds and things like that, so they'll be able to start blending and, all that good stuff. But they will have some strategies to use so that, it won't be like the kindergarten teachers are starting, from the ground up. Right.
At least they have the exposure.
Yeah,
exactly. They have the exposure, and then they can just build on that prior knowledge. All right, great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you.
All right.